What's up, world? I'm Matt Newberg from Hungary, and this is The Feed. Each episode, we'll dive into conversations with the industry insiders who are leveraging technology to shape the way we eat. On today's episode of The Feed, I sat down with Matthew Kenney, a world-renowned plant-based chef, restaurateur, educator, and entrepreneur. In this episode, we talk about Matthew's launch of the first plant-based IP holding company, how he's transitioned his restaurants from owned and operated businesses to asset-light franchises, and his thoughts on the future plant-based dining landscape. Matthew, awesome to have you on board. I'd love to start off by just having you talk to us about your background growing up in Maine, kind of how that kind of shaped your culinary ethos, so to speak, and then kind of how that brought about the rest of your career through Matthew Kenney Cuisine and now your latest venture, Ascension.
Yeah, it did kind of come full circle, so thanks for asking that question. My parents we lived on the coast, and my dad was in real estate, but they both grew up on farms, and Maine's season is like weekly. It changes, sometimes weekly, sometimes daily. And we were very connected to the seasons, and I mean the micro seasons as well. We had our own honeybees and tapped maple trees in the backyard and elsewhere. In those days I was obviously not plant-based, and we had our own lobster traps, fished and hunted, foraged for fiddleheads, and harvested wild blueberries, made cider in the fall. It was jarring and pickling and gardening and so forth. It was like a normal part of life there. I didn't appreciate it at the time. It was a chore. But later on, I really developed a very strong sense for identifying the freshest, best, most seasonal and local organic ingredients. And so I was very passionate about food. I loved food, but I also loved health and wellness. And it was probably, 15 years old when I started going to a gym at 5 o'clock in the morning before school, which, just kind of recognize the connection between eating well and physical movement and mindfulness and how we experience life. And so I went to college, for something totally unrelated. But as I got into the culinary career after college and after culinary school, that came back to me, that passion for finding the best seasonal ingredients and fresh flavors. And I just ingrained something in me that gave me a sense of groundedness that I feel like, I'll never lose. And in many ways, I actually have sharpened it since then.
Amazing. And then how did that kind of evolve to, your restaurants and now what you're looking to do with Ascension, which we'll dive into deeper, but just kind of at a high level, if you could tell everybody listening about your kind of restaurant career and now where you're at with the brands that you're working with, that'd be awesome.
Well, it's a little bit incongruent to have a passion for health and wellness and fine dining. They're two different things. And in French culinary school, the first thing we learn is more salt, more butter, more cream, a lot of white flour and so forth. It's all about flavor and presentation, which I loved. I mean, I took away a lot of that part of it, but it was a struggle for me because I also wanted to eat and serve people food that, helped them be well. So my first job while I was in culinary school was at a Sicilian restaurant in New York called Malvasia, named after, it's the island off the coast of Lipari, Southern Italian cuisine. And actually, it was a very good balance between what I loved and still feeling well. I mean, not really any butter to speak of, and a lot of wild herbs like wild fennel and golden raisins. It was just a really delicious food by an amazingly talented chef. And that was the first time that I recognized, okay, you can live this gourmet lifestyle, enjoy food and wine, and still, maintain health. It's not like going to have a souffle and all these really heavy dishes that bog you down for 2 or 3 days and ultimately can cause harm to our health overall. So when I opened my first restaurant in 1993, sounds like a long time ago.
30 years ago.
It was, it incorporated a lot of this Southern Italian Mediterranean ideation into the menu. And we really didn't use any of the butter sauces, the reductions of wine and, mounting with butter and all of that, or clarified butter, none of that. It was olive oil, citrus, fresh herbs, fresh ingredients, very seasonal. And, that was great at the time, but over the next, I don't know, 7 to 10 years, in the early stages of my career, I got more and more into cooking, but I also got more and more into health and wellness because, longevity becomes important and you start to listen to your body more and listen to your mind more. And I started eating pretty much vegetarian without being one. Told friends that I would be one. And then one day I was introduced to a raw vegan restaurant in New York. And it just sort of hit me like at that moment that if somebody could take that cuisine and elevate it and put it in the right environment, that it's really like the future of how we should be eating. So we can indulge every day, love the food, be creative, have a great experience, and serve ourselves and the planet, in the most, in the best way possible. That was like 2002. So 2000, yeah. So it was 10 years later, approximately.
So yeah, looking at the broader dining landscape, kind of you had to, I guess, look at the white space that you're filling within, I guess, fine dining and plant-based. How would you kind of look at that matrix, and where would you kind of draw a circle for your brands?
In the early stages of plant-based cuisine, we almost felt like, well, we didn't feel like we had to be apologetic. But it's vegan. And these days, I think we don't do that. Like some of our latest concepts, we don't say plant-based, we don't say vegan. The vegan's not on our website. It's cuisine, using the best ingredients possible. And that's what we feel like the representation of, if it's an Italian concept or a Mexican concept, our position is that's the best iteration of that concept. And it's, it's healthy and it's fresh and it's vibrant and flavorful and pleasurable as it can be. So, I'm not an activist. I mean, I support, of course, all the things that help the planet and help animals, but that's not my goal. Like as a chef, I'm aesthetically inclined. I want to work with things that I think are the most exciting and the most beautiful, but that I'm also aligned with personally. And it's a complete alignment for me. Like it's actually as indulgent as anything, and I really believe that. And I have for years, way before I think I had anybody supporting that belief.
It's interesting to see, like, yeah, the evolution over the last 20 years, from where you were with kind of, I'm not sure I know the exact NYC restaurant you're talking about, but maybe I do. But to now having this very, we have a lot more options that are plant-based. And I'm just curious to get your take on Daniel Hume's, announcement, which I think a lot of the mainstream were like kind of in shock about, of him basically pivoting to a complete plant-based restaurant. Some people thinking, oh, this is how you become, a more profitable establishment. And obviously the price point is super high, and you tend to associate that with meat. And it's just like there's a lot to unpack there. So I'm just kind of curious to get your take on that.
Well, I've been there twice. It's been completely packed both times I was there. The food's beautiful. I mean, it's stunning. Like, it's easy to pick on something that's $400 per person. Like, I get it. It's, I've been invited there on business dinners, so that's a tough market to be in. But he's doing an incredible job. His team and himself. Like, what I love about what Daniel's done is that he's basically not trying to recreate foods that are typically known, as being animal based. He's actually looking at foods that are inherently plant-based around the world and making them, serving them in an upscale, beautiful manner. So the fact that he's full, and I'm sure he's going to take some some hits because that's just how it goes in this industry. But he's doing an incredible job. I love it.
Yeah, I still haven't had a chance to try the new EMP, but I'm
But
definitely curious.
some of the best like plant-based meals I've had in the world have been by chefs you would not expect, like Alex Atala at Dom in Copenhagen, Rene Redzepi at Noma, and John George at a couple of his places. Like, I mean, some of the best chefs in the world are producing some of the best plant-based foods. It's just they're not exclusive to that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I had like a lotus beetroot from the latest Noma pop up in Japan that he basically made into a steak au poivre, and it was it wasn't so much a novelty as it was just like a great dish. It just so happened to elicit that feeling. But I feel like a lot of like the mainstream QSR driven stuff is all about replicating something that you used to enjoy that was quote unquote unhealthy and now making it kind of vegan friendly. And I'm not sure, I'm sure you have thoughts on this, operating different types of restaurants, some of which are um, trying to recreate comfort foods and do it in a better way. But yeah, I'm just kind of curious, like,
I think I think it's a process. We all have our own process, and as individuals and as a society, um, when you first go plant-based, you want familiar. It's hard to go in an entirely new direction. So we're trying to do something we're familiar with, but oftentimes you end up trying to recreate things that you associate with what you're familiar with, which is not what you actually eat. So
mm,
I think a lot of people, when they first try plant-based, they end up eating less healthy than they were eating before because they're going toward like the junk food. And it's like, okay, it's
mm.
vegan, so I can eat a pint of ice cream or two cheeseburgers. Um,
Right.
but the reality is like when your body gets used to it, like sprouts have multiple times more nutrition than like sprouted broccoli sprouts than a broccoli crown. So there's so much there, and eventually, you can be those things taste as good as like that cheeseburger or those French fries. I'm not against either, by the way, but I do find that like nutrient dense cuisine, nutrient dense foods with a lot of life, in them and very activated and also ferments. You know, it just requires less calories and gives you more energy overall because you're not spending your energy digesting. But anyway, in answer to your question, yeah, I think that's a phase. It's a bridge for a lot of people, and we're going to go through a number of iterations before we really adopt a whole plant-based diet. But I am thankfully seeing governments and institutions that are developing really massive plans to help integrate healthier choices into people's diets because we really can't deny that we're off track when you have the levels of obesity and childhood obesity and heart conditions and so forth. Like that's not how we're programmed to be. So it's possible to enjoy food, enjoy life, live our best life for longevity um, and not have to do things that are not serving us or the planet.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely a crisis, a metabolic and obesity crisis, facing this country, and it's just on the rise. And yeah, I guess you got to meet people halfway. And there's also this gradient of of diets that could make a dent on all these different things you're talking about, whether it's the health of our planet or the health of individuals. It doesn't have to be a binary switch, which I think is a good transition to talk kind of about your portfolio. I'd love to hear kind of, where you are now, how many concepts you're kind of responsible for, where they're located, and then, how many different CPG products that you're also kind of consulting with or invested in, and how those kind of tie into those properties.
So, okay, to mention Ascension here.
Yeah, whatever is good for you.
Okay. So my vision starting back in maybe 2011, 2010 was to develop a global lifestyle brand. I mean, I love the international connections. This all started when we launched a school in 2009 in Oklahoma, and I saw students coming from Tokyo and South Korea and Russia and all over the world. And I realized that, there's a real desire globally to understand, how to enjoy foods that are healthier and plant-based. So education was a really big part of what I became focused on. And when I moved to California, 2010 or something like that, it was really to launch our culinary school. And I always envisioned the company that I was building as a collaborative effort between team members. There's one team member I've worked with for most of the last 20 years. And it was really not about being a restaurant company. It was really looking at what goes into creating a new restaurant concept. It's a recipe, of course, and a design, and it's an idea and a philosophy. But it needed to be more than that, because restaurant business is a very hard business. Everybody talks about it all the time. And that's not a myth. It's a hard business. It's expensive to build them. They're risky. Rents are high. Labor is high. Food cost is high. Business is unpredictable, especially with 2 years of COVID. So I always wanted to look beyond the four walls and say, how can we're passionate about this cuisine. It's not just that we're passionate about opening a restaurant. We're actually passionate about as many people as possible experiencing this food and the impact it can make on the world. And that's why I looked into education, because if people aren't trained to prepare this kind of food, most of the world won't enjoy it. And they're going to just be cooking something else, and people will be eating something else. And the same thing goes with consumer packaged goods and different types of services, or whether it be a catering event or a media project, whether it's a cookbook. So basically, we are an innovation brand. And that's not to say all we do is create, because we do a lot of hard work. There's hard work every single day, 7 days a week. But the core of what we do and what we stand for is the innovation within the plant-based space, trying to always take it forward, and then looking at these different outlets. And I didn't want to be defined by restaurants, because as grateful as I am for the guests we've had and the experiences we've had, and we're still opening restaurants, by the way. We have just opened 2 in the last couple months and have a couple more opening. But I saw as we grew, and we're involved in over 50 restaurants, maybe half of those we were the operators and the responsible party. The other half were more like joint ventures, partnerships, licensing agreements, but they all had the same food philosophy that we developed. And I started to recognize that the ones that operated the best were the ones where we had partners, because we're, an LA-based company, and our partners might be in Madrid, and they live there, and they know the culture, and they're there every day. And I would see that a restaurant in Madrid's running better than one in, a couple states from us. So I made a decision about a year and a half ago to become what I call asset light, more focused on partnerships, and that would free us up to take the work that we do on the innovation side and develop more products. So we're involved in a number of different products. We're a partner in Antidote, which is a partnership with Dr. Amir Marashi, and all of the products in that brand. I think there are like a dozen or 15. Sort of anti-inflammatory, a lot of really good superfoods, a lot of spices and flavors you'll taste in those products that aren't common in snack products or superfoods or protein powders. We're developing, this one I haven't announced yet, but we're doing a botanical gin with a really creative group that uses artificial intelligence based in Israel. and it's going to use flavors from some of my favorite flavors from growing up in Maine, like wild mushroom and maple and pine, things like that, lemon balm. So, we're involved in probably 40 or 50 projects. Ascension is a new brand that will be the platform where we carry that forward. And it's really meant to be a platform where some of the most talented people can gather and create these ideas and work with excellent partners throughout the world to, distribute them without getting too caught up in, running day to day. And I hear that a lot from young people. They're like, well, I just want to create. If I said that when I was 25, like that wouldn't be appropriate. But we've been operating for dozens of years, and I've learned what we're good at and what we're not as great at. And so we're really just trying to channel our, where we put our energy to be the most effective possible to change the food paradigm.
Amazing. Sounds like a lot of fun stuff you have on your plate. I guess let's dive into like what the different avenues are for your collaboration. So like in my mind, if I'm a landlord or I'm opening up a new hotel or I'm an entrepreneur who has experience in, CPG, like I come to you essentially to, either license one of your existing, IP brand IP, or you help me essentially co-create the culinary aspect of something new. Is that kind of the high level?
Kind of. I mean, there's a lot that's not visible. There are some of the biggest hospital institutions in the, globally, approach us because they have a mission to be, for example, 30% or 40% plant-based in 2 years. I mean, these are real examples. I just can't give the names. And, you're talking about systems that run across 50, 60 countries, and that involves enterprise training, which is something we built. Like in addition to our online school where we have like 5,000 students, we have an enterprise platform. So we could train 4,000 chefs at once, basically with converting their language and giving them options to do that. So those are what are really exciting to me. But yes, it is a lot of entrepreneurs. If it's an individual, like somebody, we get these every day. I mean, I have 150 or 200 live, leads like that at any given time. And somebody the other day wrote to me and said that he inherited money and wanted to open a restaurant. And I said, don't do that. So, I mean, I don't mean don't do it because I love restaurants, but nobody should do it and put their inheritance at risk. It's a tough business. You have to be, ready for that. But hotels, on the other hand, especially hotels that are busy, that have a high occupancy rate, that's a captive audience. And they're often using spaces that are not necessarily on the ground level, wouldn't be revenue producing spaces otherwise, but the audience is there, so they can generate, revenue from that, and it's a lot safer for them and for us. But yeah, it's hotels, restaurants, department stores, boats, planes. I mean, pretty much anywhere food is served, we've had discussions or worked in them.
Very cool. And so what do you think is like the key to maintaining the quality of these brands? So you have some of these brands that, I guess are purely licensed, it seems. And then there's some brands that, you may have owned and operated, and now you're kind of handing the reins to another partner. I think about, like plant food and wine, or, and getting into frozen pizza and translating something that is physical to another space, like the frozen aisle. I guess like how do you go about maintaining that level of scrutiny and operational like excellence? I mean, you already kind of hinted that like you're actually happier handing over the reins, but like how does that play out to be more successful when you go into these kinds of agreements with other operators?
Well, I'll give a couple quick examples. So Plant Food and Wine, we were on Abbot Kinney in Venice for almost 10 years. And we had a team that, many of them were there most of the years that we were open, 7, 8 years. But it was an old building, 1920s. It's always like some kind of issue with the building. And with COVID and all the other, break-ins, and it's just like endless. And people leave too. They have families, they have kids, they move away, and consistency is tough. And I think of us more as a culinary innovation company, or a brand. We're innovating on the brand level as well, and trying to be strategic in every direction. But when it's hard to be like a really solid like operating company. So Four Seasons, for example, they're a great brand, but they're amazing operators. Like their hospitality, you cannot walk by a member of the Four Seasons team without them looking you in the eye and saying, have a good day, or how are you? It doesn't happen. And that comes from years and years of persistence and excellence. And they really do care. Like they bring on teams that actually, it's genuine. You feel it when you walk into one of their properties. So when we take a brand that we've been running for 9 years, that is sometimes amazing and sometimes bumpy, our brand, and put it in the hands of Four Seasons Hotel in Beverly Hills, I actually have more confidence that it's going to be consistent with their involvement, because they're respectful of us. They always ask our opinion, and I mean, they're in charge, day to day. They run it, and I trust them inherently. Just like we opened our food hall in Rhode Island with Kim Anderson, and she's just amazing. Like she's on top of it every single day. Like we would never have been able to manage, several concepts under one roof in a small city in Rhode Island, serving 500,000 people a year without Kim. So, basically the answer to your question is just making sure that we work with great partners, and we've been really lucky on that level. Extremely lucky. I mean, I would, as I said in the beginning of our call, I think the restaurants and the businesses where we have partners tend to operate a little better than the ones we try to operate ourselves. And that's probably stemming from me and my emphasis on, on the innovation and the new ideas in the future. But when it translates to a product, the same thing, like same philosophy. Like I really believe that like it's important for chefs to recognize the impact they can have. So there are a lot of great products in the market. A lot of them don't really have a chef involved. They're just formulated, they're in a lab or whatever. But we take a culinary approach, which is grounded in traditional culinary training, to pretty much everything we do. So we developed the frozen pizza template for the 00 pizza, and we spent about 2 years doing it. But I think it's as good as the fresh, it's like, it's really good. It doesn't have any preservatives, nothing. And it's excellent, and it's easy to serve, and it just required a lot of steps, a lot of experimentation.
Amazing. Yeah. At a high level, how would you define the various steps that you would go through to, let's just say, launch a new restaurant concept with a third-party operator? What are those different kind of phases that you need to kind of go through to get to a point where you're ready to launch something, and how long does that typically take?
I mean, it's completely, it's random. First of all, it's a synergy between the groups. Like, we work with a lot of international groups. We work with Kerzner International. They're based in Dubai, and I love their whole team. And their projects are in Maldives, in Mexico, Rwanda. We work with, I think, 8 or 10 of their properties around the world, and they're all beautiful. But there's a central, team that we work with, and it could be a new hotel that's being built that won't have an opening for a year and a half. and we have to start formulating, working on like a kitchen design and working with their interior designers and the concept and the branding and the name. Or it could be a space that they already have, and they want to reconfigure it and relaunch in 90 days. So it's really a very broad spectrum. There's not one size fits all. It's very broad, and the timeline's always different because, as you know, like spaces are always getting repurposed and reconfigured and so forth. So we have to be ready for anything pretty much at any time.
And then you mentioned like food hall. Are there any other like I saw on your site you had like a bodega concept? Like, are you seeing more anything else in like the grocery or a convenience kind of space where you can play a role in that channel as far as like actually being a retailer?
Yeah, so we opened a new deli maybe in 2018 or so, down by Venice Beach. My first landlord at my first apartment in Venice, really cool guy, and he had some health issues and he went plant-based, and he's a developer and took over an old grocery store. It was like a cigarette and beer place down by Venice Beach. And he wanted to do something healthy there. And he built a beautiful space out and asked us to take it over and run it. And we did. We ran it for like 2-3 years, and we sold it to a Canadian public company, and they still operate it. But it's another tough business. Like retail, especially small scale, you have to be there. Like every detail counts. My friend Matt Fontana owns Bestie's Vegan Paradise,
right
in East Hollywood, and he and his partner Asia, they're like amazing. Like that store is like I just walk in there and I'm happy. Like I want to grab everything. I think we need to see more of that. Like I'd love to see 1,000 Besties in the world. It's so good, and you can snack, you can get provisions. It's just amazing, and I really would love to. If we had one of those or 5 of those in every state or every major city, like I'd be happy.
Yeah. For those listening who aren't familiar, who are not in LA, or if you are in LA, get over there. But for those who don't know, that Besties has kind of like a plant-based butcher shop in the back. They have kind of a refill station for a lot of consumables, like soaps, etc., oils. And they also, I discovered recently, they have a roller dog, a vegan roller dog, like kind of like what you would find at 7-Eleven or any fuel convenience store. And it has kind of like a cool neighborhood bodega vibe. So very much
and they have
ingrained.
They have the best vegan cheese program ever.
Yep. Very cool. So, and then I would love to now talk a little bit about the startup. So, you mentioned earlier Climax Foods is one of the ones that you're working with. There's also Lomi, which has it's a piece of hardware which makes the Pella, which I used to have. It was a compostable device where you put all your food scraps in there, and it kind of turns into soil that you can put back into your garden or compost. And then so I guess what do those partnerships look like, and like what's your kind of threshold? Like what does a brand need to demonstrate to you to say like that they're worthy of your time, because you already have your hand in so many other things? So
well, it works both ways. We have to know that we can add value to them as well, because like Thermomix, for example, we worked with Thermomix, and they've been around for years, and the best chefs in the world use Thermomix. So we were really honored that they would look at a plant-based brand to collaborate with. And Pure Juicer, which is my friend David, he used to be at what was the other cold juice press? Forgetting the name now. They're gone now, but he created the most beautiful juicing machine. It's every single part is stainless steel, with the exception of the tamper, which you push the mash through. And there's another company that we work with that has a steamer and knife companies and so forth. So like these are all things we use every day, and to the extent they want to collaborate with us, usually it involves us developing content for them. If it's a product company, it's putting the products in our restaurant to test them out, trying limited time offers, developing recipes and usage, or actually video content, helping them market, helping them navigate the market and to become mainstream. I mean, I think I have a unique vision because we look at a startup brand that might be solely focused on their product, which could be incredible, but maybe it has a limited bandwidth in terms of what impact it can make in the market. But if you pair that with another product or a different avenue, it becomes something much bigger and more impactful. So I think because we're in education and products and even work with certain parts of agriculture, and also the finish line and governments and hospitals and so forth, we have a unique perspective. And I just like making things happen that really change the food system to be a healthier one.
Awesome.
But it's not easy to explain it. It's a very complex web of relationships and experience.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're building a whole network where these brands can really plug in and kind of leverage that to get further ahead, and you can really make a lot of you can form a lot of relationships through your existing kind of portfolio for them.
Well, a lot of it is just helping people. Like I don't try to insert ourselves into situations if we can't add value, but I introduce people every day. If we can add value and we think we can make something stronger and better, and it's going to serve the guest and the consumer, great, we'll get involved. But otherwise, I'm just happy to put people together that can benefit from knowing each other.
Awesome. And I just want to go through some of these names. So we have the ones that you didn't mention that I'm just looking at on your site: Verstill, Bosque Foods, Mates, and then Antidote. I'm probably not pronouncing it right. Tell us about
it's the same as Antidote, but we just took the A off.
Okay. Yeah. If you could just real briefly, we've had Climax on before, and I think we talked about the Lomi and some of the other gadgets that you use in the kitchen. But like, you're curious about those companies in particular, like what the angle is there.
Well, with Antidote, Amir's a good friend and a partner, and we put our heads together, and we knew that we wanted to do something healthy. He's a doctor who believes that food and nutrition is has been a cause of a lot of illness, and he's just like a visionary, and he has great sense of style and so forth. So we started Antidote by doing a bar, and the bar segment was tough because we want to use these like really amazing ingredients, but we were not able to produce the bar at a price that was sellable. And so we started to go into like more snacks and superfoods and protein powders, and I think we have like 16 products. So, but I always love everything I do with them. It's everything's organic, everything's sprouted, everything's antidotal, and very straightforward. So we're just really excited to grow that. And then with Bosque, I mean they're mycelium fiber, mycelium-based alternative protein that started in Germany, but they're launching in the U.S. They have 3 really phenomenal products, and they launched it with a modest budget, but it's very thoughtful, really innovative, using a lot of technology, and it fit because it's 4 or 5, 6 ingredients. It's not like highly processed food that doesn't feel healthy to eat. And the others, I mean, Lomi's incredible. That's like an amazing machine that if you have a garden, or even if you don't have a garden, you put your food waste in there, even some of your paper waste, you hit one button and you have compost the next day. So even if you're not using that compost for a garden, just for your lawn or like for the neighbor's lawn, It just cuts down on waste. It cuts down on garbage bags, and it's amazing. It's an incredible machine. We probably have like Mates is really cool. It's my friend Jameson. He's been involved in a lot of businesses. He's been an investor in several companies that you would know about, and he had this idea of partnering experts in their field with producers of products or people who can actually make something happen. So, for example, it's all online, so I can say it. The first group of partners, it's like Mates is the brand, and it partners these experts in their field with other producers to develop a product or an idea. And it's Kate Hudson has one, Venus Williams has Happy Viking, Vanessa Hudgens has a product under here, and somehow I was lucky enough to be part of that group. So it's the four of us. We each have a sub-brand. We each develop a product or an idea, and that will continue to grow with other partnerships within that Mates umbrella. And they're just, they always come to the table with great design, great branding, good ideas. And same with Verstill. Like I mentioned them earlier in the conversation. I didn't give them a name, but that's where we're doing the botanical gin. One of them took Hendrix to market. He was involved in the early days of Hendrix. And they're like working in 3 corners of Israel. And I think the CEO was like a trainer of fighter pilots in Israel or something. I mean, they're just all super like passionate, creative people. So when we can connect with people like that and do a product that we would never be able to do on our own, that's like really exciting to me.
Very cool. I'm curious to kind of talk to you about kind of this. It seems like a lot of these brands, these are all very next gen kind of thinking around plant-based, and I don't know what your thoughts are, but I guess like, how do you see, if you look at like plant-based 1.0 is very much like processed, beyond impossible. And then one thing I noticed about your menus is like, you don't use any of these products, and we talked about that earlier. And so, harnessing all natural ingredients, like really using plants as opposed to, a lot of processed ingredients. And so I guess, where do you think we are now in this evolution? And then like, how do you see things like cell cultivated meat evolving? Do you think that's kind of on that trajectory of things like fungi based proteins, as kind of like the wave after that, or I guess, where are we heading with all of this?
Well, I always felt like, even starting 20 years ago, I thought that we would go through this process of like replacing traditional proteins with an alternative that might be processed, might not be the healthiest, and then the next phase is a healthier phase. And then I think eventually we get to the point where our youth, the young people of today, under 10, for example, they're not used to eating steak or chicken, so we don't need to replace anything because there's nothing to replace. I was at a friend of mine has a number of companies, public companies that are, he's the CEO, and he has a summit every year of the CEOs of all his sub brands, and he had a speaker on disruption. And the one thing that the speaker was talking about, one of the things that he was talking about was the idea that the cattle industry is largely going to start going away in 2030. I'm not predicting that. It's like, I'd be happy about it, but I'm not predicting it. But I think, so I think that's a short-term thing. But we all have to like go with the times. Like, Beyond's been around several years, and they've made a big impact. Like, I don't know how it's going to turn out for them in the end, but they made a huge impact. They got the financial markets to wake up. The media woke up, and a lot of people transition because of it. So it's all good. It's just it's a process. But to me, it all leads back to eating the way we're meant to be, meant to be eating, and that doesn't involve a lot of processing, in my opinion.
Right, and you would put cell-cultivated meat in that category.
Well, I don't know as much as I should because my friend Andrew is an investor in multiple cell-based companies, and I trust his opinion. So like I haven't tried it because I'm not trying to emulate the experience of meat. I have to pay attention to that, but it's not a critical component of what I do. Like I love vegetables. There's nothing better than a great avocado. So, or an amazing, mushroom dish. But I mean, look, I have to respect what people want, and we might try it, we might serve it. I don't know, but I don't. It's not what I think about when I think about food. But I'm glad they're here because it at least changes up, the idea of factory farming.
Right. The alternative is much worse.
Yeah.
Just real quickly, I know so you have 00 has meatballs that, are not using any fancy ingredients. I'm just curious, like, what's kind of the root of that recipe?
That recipe is red beans and lentil. I think it might have a little bit of farro. We tweak it a lot, but yeah, it's super clean.
So this is kind of like this is where you think like we need to just go as a society. It's like less around like trying to develop, technology that's going to get us to one-to-one replication. It's more about enjoying the like innate joys and nutritional benefits of eating plants.
Well, look, I'm all for innovation and technology. So if some group is going to develop, a product that has like incredible texture and ultimate nutrition, and it's digestible and it doesn't give you a stomach ache, great. But a recent friend I've made, Barry, their company's wild about sprouts. The sprouts are grown in the container that that you eat them in, and I mean you can live off them, and they're great. The taste is great. I mean you can add sun-dried tomato and some pine nut, olive oil, and sea salt and whatever. But I mean, I'm all for it. Try everything. Like that's great. I just know that like for me, like the best meal I've ever had was standing under a tree in northern Australia, eating lychees. One at a time until I had like 40 of them. So I'll try anything, I'm open-minded.
Love it. Very cool. So like as we kind of come towards the end of the conversation, I'd love for you to just like pontificate on like what you think, obviously not everybody has your background and feels the same way that you do about the plant-based diet. And we talked a little bit about this, but what do you think is going to be kind of the carrot that we need to introduce to consumers, or what's going to be that moment where we can really start to see a shift towards this kind of eating? And, do you think, like, one of the things that comes to mind as of late for me are these ribs from a company called Juicy Marble. They made a plant-based.
Yeah, I tried it.
You tried it. So yeah, I'm really like, I definitely feel a certain way about this, and I'm not sure how you feel, but like, do you think that this is where you meet consumers, or is this kind of like a red herring here?
I think it's funny. I mean, I was like, I couldn't stop reading the label. There's like endless content on that thing. They sent it to me. Look, there's so many different segments, like young men and young women and older people, and like it just has to be good. Like whatever's done in plant-based just has to be better, faster. It has to get to the market faster. It has to be less expensive to produce because we're not relying on 40% of our of our land is farmland, agriculture. So, yeah, there's just it just has to be competitive, and it can be in any segment. But no, just Marvel, I think it's great. I mean, if I was like 28, 30, like I'd be like love that, and I still loved it. I thought it was fun. But yeah, that's exciting to me that so much keeps popping up, you know. I'd like to see a little more collaboration within the industry so that we don't have so many independents like really putting themselves out there and having great ideas and not having the resources to follow through with their vision. So that's one thing I want to really try to address if I can somehow. But there's no one answer. It's like a different audience, different geographic locations, etc.
Right. So it sounds like there's just going to be products for everyone. They're just going to happen to be plant-based. And even better if we can take some of the beloved brands that consumers have been enjoying over decades and get them to create variants with, you know, whatever mycoprotein that they can infuse or any kind of plant-based ingredient.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Matthew, this has been really great. I just want to give you some time to plug away any Ascension or, you know, if brands want to get in touch with you, entrepreneurs, any of the folks that we...
Yeah, Ascension, that's the best way to reach us, ASCENTION, ascensionglobal.com, actually. We haven't really even formally announced it. It's live and we're doing business under that company, but just wanted to get a few things in order before we really announce it. But it's okay to talk about it.
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks again for coming on, and we'll be paying very close attention.
Thanks for tuning in. If you like what you hear, please hit subscribe wherever you're listening to this podcast. And if you're curious to get a first-hand look at the cutting edge of food and tech, check out hungry.tv. That's Hungry with no U, where you can join in on live conversations like these or sign up for the free weekly newsletter.